Hi everyone, my name is Peter. Thanks for joining me at Our Worship Sound. In a previous video, I shared some things about how I set up this room to be more soundproof and limit the amount of sound that goes in and out of this room. And in this video, I want to talk about some things I did to make the sound inside the room better. And I think you'll find that if you're willing to roll up your sleeves a little bit and do some work, you can achieve some really good results for just a medium amount of money instead of spending your whole next paycheck on studio foam and all the fancy stuff. So when we talk about sound treatment or making the sound inside of a room better, I think there are two things that we're trying to do. Number one, we're trying to get in control of the echoes that are going on. And in this room, without any sort of acoustical treatment, if you were to clap your hands or to listen to music or hear any sort of loud sound, you start to hear some kind of nasty slap echoes, and it just wouldn't sound very pleasant. And the other thing that we're trying to do with sound treatment is to even out what we call the frequency response of the room. And we all know sound is having high frequencies, middle frequencies, and low frequencies. And when they interact in an acoustical space, any kind of a space, that space can accentuate different frequencies within that sound. And so the goal in treating a room is to try to get that frequency response more even. So let me share some things that I did in this room to try to make it sound better. First of all, to try to get in control of the echoes, I have these sound panels at different places around the room. And if you are doing any sort of listening to music or mixing music, the first thing that you want to do is take care of what we call first order reflections. And the way you figure out where those are happening is you sit at your listening position and have someone else take a small mirror and lay it flat up against the wall and move it around to different places on the wall in your room. And anytime you can see a reflection of your studio speakers in that mirror, you have what we call a first order reflection, where the sound from that speaker could go straight to the wall and then bounce right at your ears. And so those are some of the things that we want to eliminate first. And in this room, this is my listening position if I were mixing music. And so I have panels on both sides over here to get off the side walls. I also have a panel behind the desk because sound emanates from the back of the speaker as well. It could go off the front wall and come right at my ears that way. And I also have acoustical panels on the back wall. And I'm going to show you how I put those panels together. Another place to not neglect is the ceiling. Okay, and I have a panel on the ceiling as well, and that probably does as much as any single piece of acoustical treatment in this room. It's really effective and it's really, really helpful. So I'm very thankful that is up there. So that's what I did for the reflections in the room. Now to even out the frequencies, the biggest problem that I was going to have in this room were lower and mid frequencies because of the dimensions of this room, and it's not a big space. Whenever I have friends come over, they've seen these videos online, they always remark something like, "Oh, I forgot how small this room actually is," after seeing that video. But this room is actually only about 9.5 feet long by 8.5 feet wide by 7 feet tall. And so those dimensions are pretty close together. And so each dimension tends to accentuate roughly the same frequencies. And so what I would end up with in this space without any sort of treatment is a big buildup of low and low mid frequencies. And to tackle that, we need what are called bass traps. And so anytime any of these corners where you see dark gray panels that go from the floor to the ceiling, those are bass traps. And behind those panels, I have cut into triangles stacks and stacks and stacks of a really heavy-duty insulation material behind those. And so these are called actually super chunks. There's a particular kind of bass trap called super chunks. And these will dampen all frequencies. They'll dampen the highs as well as the lows. But they're effective on the lows because of the density of the material behind them and the depth of them. Because, and I could be ignorant on this, but to the best of my knowledge, lower frequencies have longer sound waves and they need a greater depth of material to stop them. And so, and we also tend to have a bigger buildup of bass sounds in the corners. And that's why we tend to put bass traps in the corners. So I'm going to show you how I constructed those as well. So those are the two main things, to try to tame the echoes and to try to limit the amount of bass buildup in the room. That was what I was after. So let me show you a little bit about how I constructed these different acoustical treatments. First of all, for these panels that are on the wall, I used what's a pretty common material for these purposes. If you do any sort of research into sound treatment, kind of DIY sound treatment at home, you're going to come across this brand and this model number of Owens Corning 703. And what they are 4x2 sheets of a semi-rigid, kind of compressed fiberglass material that they work really well for these panels, not only because they're constructed in a way that they're easily mountable, but they're just the right density, and even at 2 inches thick, they have some good absorptive properties for lower frequencies as well. So what I did originally, when before I redid the colors in my studio and everything, was I simply put a 1x3 frame backing on the backside of the material, or on the panel, and then I carefully wrapped fabric around that. And there are lots of demonstrations you can find on YouTube to take you through that process. When I redid the colors in the studio, I wanted a little bit more professional look. I wanted sharper edges, sharper corners, and so then I used 1x4 strips of wood to create a frame for them. And so I simply measured them off so that the inside dimensions of the frame would be a little bit larger than 48 inches by 24 inches, so I wouldn't have any trouble sliding the panels in. And so I just cut them to length with a circular saw. When I put them together, I would pre-drill 2 holes in each end, and then just use basic wood screws or drywall screws to keep them in place. I didn't use any glue, just the screws. And once those were constructed, I would lay them out on fabric, and it was just basic broadcloth fabric that I ordered online, not very expensive, maybe about $2 a yard or so. I just found the colors that I want, and cut that to about the dimensions I needed. And then as you're covering these, you just go down one side, you start in the middle, and then kind of work out from there. On the first side, you just have to pull it straight along that edge, and then you go to the opposite side, and then you start to pull it across a little bit, making sure that it's tight in both directions. And on the short ends is where it starts to get a little bit trickier. But again, you start in the middle and work out from there. And then once you get to the corners, you have to fold the fabric in at a 45-degree angle, and then staple it. I just stapled it to the back of these wood frames. And it takes a little bit of practice to get it how you really want it, to get it look really nice. But when the product was finished, it really came together nicely. Now I think with these, once I got them put together, the fabric would tend to stretch a little bit, and so it would get wrinkled on the front. And so I just had to take them down, pull some of the staples out, and then just kind of restretch the fabric and staple it in a little bit tighter. So that's how those panels came together. And for the bass traps, I'm going to share the dimensions and the plans I used for the particular size of bass traps. Now, there are lots of plans online that take the full 4-foot by 2-foot panels, and you cut them into 4 triangles, and then you just stack the triangles from there. Given those dimensions, they were going to take up a lot of real estate in this room, and so I figured out a way to make it just a little bit smaller. As you can see, they're still very good size, but with a little bit of experimentation, I was able to get it a little bit smaller and make full use of every panel and get a little bit more out of it, actually. So I'll share those plans on my blog. So I just cut the panels with a bread knife, a cheap bread knife, and then you just start stacking triangles, floor to ceiling. And it's messy work. You want to make sure you're wearing long pants, long sleeves, probably use a dust mask as well. It's not fun working with this stuff, especially if you're outside and it's hot. It's not fun. But once you get done with it, it's really effective. So you just stack them floor to ceiling, and then you just have to build some sort of frame that's going to cover over it, and then staple the fabric on that frame the same way. Now, as far as mounting the frame to the wall, you can see from the video what I have going there. And on the back of that little triangular section, I just have a hook, and then there's a screw on the wall. It was pretty challenging to get them hooked up to the wall. It takes a lot of trial and error. Eventually you get it and it'll stay in place, and it'll be really effective that way. So that's how I put those in. I've just redone the colors in the studio, recovered everything. Happy with how it looks now, and happy definitely how it sounds. I love being in my studio, spending time in here, listening to music, creating music in here, and the fact that it's soundproof, relatively speaking, and that it's treated in here. The sound is pleasing in here. I enjoy playing my keyboard in here. I enjoy listening to music in here, and it's just a great usable space for that because of the treatment. Now, before we go, let me share a little bit about how to obtain these materials. I didn't mention that in the super chunks, I didn't use the Owens Corning 703 because that would get too expensive. What I used was something that's very similar to it, but a lot cheaper, and it's called rock wool or mineral wool. And actually, you know what, if I had to do it over again, I might use that for the acoustical panels as well, if I was using the frames. Now, you couldn't just wrap fabric around the rock wool because it would look really terrible. The edges would not hold up. But if you're using the frames, it might work really well. So look for rock wool or mineral wool. Now, you can order both of these types of products online. But before you do that, I would suggest you look around your area for a specialty insulation provider, because you might be able to find the products for a lot cheaper. And that was my situation, that I had to go 45 miles away, but I ended up finding a place that would offer. And then now they only dealt with contractors, actually, and so I had to work through a contractor that I had a relationship with to get that material. But I was able to get it at a much better price. So look around. You might be able to find it in your area cheaper. You're not going to find it at Lowe's. You're not going to find it at Home Depot or any other sort of big box home supply store. You'll need to go to someplace that's more of a specialty type of place to find it. So anyway, that's basically about all I know about studio treatment. But like I said, it's given me really good results for a medium amount of money. It wasn't a huge amount. I probably spent about $400 on insulation for this room, and I ended up with a little bit extra too, so it's not too bad. But anyway, I hope that was helpful, and I've got one more video on how I do things in the studio, more with the video setups and everything like that. That'll be coming soon. And thanks for watching. We'll see you later.